Let's now quickly summarize the entire General Clauses Act. So, we are going to summarize the entire chapter now, and I want you to be very quick and recollect whatever we have done so far in this chapter. So, this is going to be a full length summary video of the entire General Clauses Act, which will also help you in your last minute revision. So, let's start. When we started with the General Clauses Act, we started with its background and what was the purpose behind making the act. As you all know, this act is enacted. This act was enacted on 11th of March 1897, and prior to this act coming into existence, there were also two earlier General Clauses Act. One was 1868 and the other was 1887. So these were the two General Clauses Act which were prior in existence, and then these two acts were consolidated and extended, and that's how General Clauses Act 1897 came into existence. Talking about its extent, so there is no specific territorial extent specified with respect to the General Clauses Act. However, we have understood that to whichever clause, for whichever central act's interpretation, we use the General Clauses Act. Whatever is the applicability of that central act, the General Clauses Act will also be applicable to that extent. Talking about the most important point, that is, what is the purpose of the General Clauses Act? So one is to shorten the language of that. So there are several definitions which we have studied under the General Clauses Act. It helps the it helps in avoiding the unnecessary repetition of a few words in different acts. So ultimately shortening the language. Then there's also uniformity of expression. If one term has one specific definition given to it, it becomes easier to interpret it. Apart from it, it also helps fix all the gaps due to slips and oversights. This act is also called as the Interpretation of Act or Law of all laws. Why do we call it Law of all laws? Because this is ultimately helping us in interpreting an act, interpreting a statute. So that is the basic regarding the General Clauses Act. Then we understood a few basic terms. What is a preamble? Preamble gives us the scope, objective, and the purpose with which the act has been made. So preamble, every act has its own preamble. So we also saw some examples of preambles of the General Clauses Act, Companies Act. What does a preamble contain? It helps us identify the scope and object and also the purpose with which an act is made. Then comes in the definition. So every act has a separate definition section. Definitions are generally given in section 2 of the act, section 2 or section 3 as the case may be. Under the General Clauses Act, the definitions are given to us under section 3. Then there are certain terms which are used when we define terms, and what are their meanings. The term means implies that the definition is an exhaustive definition. Exhaustive means what? No other words can be added in the meaning of the definition which have been specified. So that is the use of word means. If the word used in the definition is includes, it implies that the definition is an inclusive definition. If the word used is includes, it implies that the definition is an inclusive definition. If the word used is shall, it gives a mandatory force to the definition. So if the word used in the definition is shall, it implies that something which has been stated is compulsory. This has to be done. It is mandating something. And if the word used is may, it gives a discretionary power. Alright. So wherever the word shall is used, it implies that it is mandatory, and wherever the word may is used, it implies that it is discretionary. So, in certain situations, it may also happen that the word may is read as shall. So, we've also seen an example of this under the Companies Act. So, these were the basic terms which we should know before we understand the general rules. Then we came to section 3, wherein we saw different definitions. So, under the definitions, I'm not doing all the definitions again, because if I start doing the entire definition section here, it will be a very lengthy summary. I do not want that to happen. So here I've covered up all the important definitions. Talking about affidavit. What is an affidavit? Affidavit includes affirmations. It contains affirmations and declarations. Affirmation and declaration. These affirmation and declaration are on oath. This is something which a person has given on oath. It is in writing. So this is a document, written document, affirming or declaring something, and it is something which a person has stated by on an oath. And this is used instead of swearing in. The definition of affidavit, oath, and swearing is the same. Then coming to the next definition, which is the Coming to the next definition, which is the definition of a central act. What is a central act? Central act is the act which is made by the union government. Acts which are made by the union government or the central government are generally the central acts. And apart from it, we've also understood that under the central acts, it also includes acts of the Indian legislature, Dominion legislature, and the acts which are made by the parliament. So apart from the acts made by the central union government, it includes acts of the Indian legislature, Dominion legislature, and it also includes acts of parliament, right? So that is, those are your central acts. Talking about document. So what is document? Document again is a writing. It is something in writing. Now this can either be in letters, figures, numbers, photographs. It includes paintings. It can be on any substance or any matter. What is the purpose? It is recording of a matter. Recording of a matter. The purpose of document is what? It is recording a matter. Then comes in financial year. What is a financial year? Financial year is the period starting from 1st of April. What is the difference between financial year and calendar year? Financial year starts from 1st of April and calendar year starts from 1st of January. Then comes in another important definition, which is the definition of immovable property. What is an immovable property? What does it contain? It contains land, benefits arising out of the earth, benefits arising out of land, things attached to earth or forming part of earth, attached earth, or things which are permanently fastened to the earth. Things which are permanently fastened to the earth. So all of these are your immovable property. Under this, we have also understood that when we give right to access anything, a right to access any benefits which arise out of the earth, that is also referred to as an immovable property. And what is the definition of movable property? Very simple. It basically is a property which is not an immovable property is a movable property. So very simple definition of a movable property. Something which is not an immovable property becomes a movable property. What is an offense? It is an act or omission which is punishable under law. Not only an act or omission, but it should also be punishable under a. Who is a person? Person here includes a company, body of individuals, association, etc. These are the specific inclusions in the definition of a person. Then comes in another very important definition, which is the definition of good faith. What does good faith mean? Doing an act honestly. Doing something honestly. The definition given under the General Clauses Act only states that an act which is being done honestly is said to be done in good faith. However, if we understand the definition of good faith as per civil law, it basically says there has to be honesty, there has to be honesty and due care. So this is stated where? This is stated under the civil law. It is not stated under the General Clauses Act. It is stated under the civil law. So these are some important definitions which we saw under section. Moving on to section 4. So section 4 was applicability of different definitions to different acts which were made. So it was basically divided in three parts. So applicability to the 1968 Act, acts made after 1968, then acts made after 1887, and then the acts made post 11th of March 1897. So that was stated in the section 4. And post this, we started with the general rules of construction or interpretation. The first section which we saw here was section 5, which talks about commencement of an act. What does section 5 say? It says if nothing is mentioned, then the act shall come into force on the date when it is receiving the assent from the president. So if nothing has been mentioned, from which date will the act come into force? It will come into force from the date on which it is receiving assent from the president. So this is the first situation. Apart from it, we have also understood that if it is notified in the official gazette and a specific date has been mentioned in the official gazette, then the act should come into force from that specific date. A specific date has been mentioned in the official gazette, then the act will come into force from the specific date mentioned. However, if it is published in the official gazette, it can also be the date on which it is published in the official gazette. And we've also understood that the central government, that the courts, they cannot force the government, they cannot compel the government to bring an act into force. It is the government's discretion. Then comes in section 6, wherein we have understood what is the effect of repeal. So repeal will not have any effect of reviving any act, and it will not affect any penalties or punishment which were levied in the act which is repealed. It will not affect any prior management. It will also not have an impact on the claims which are made or privileges which are given under the prior act, that is the repealed act. And it will also not have any impact on the litigations or remedies which are ongoing under the right. So the repeal will not have any impact in all of these situations. Textual amendment section 6A. What does it say? It says that if an act was made to amend an act and later on is repealed, so the amendment will not go anywhere, it will still be in existence. If an act is making a textual amendment in another act and is there, later on repealed, it will have no impact on on the amendment which was, so that is section 6A. Section 7, it talks about revival of repealed enactment. So it gives the power to the government to revive an act which was repealed, that is, which was cancelled. The government, if they want to, they can revive an act which was repealed earlier. However, in order to revive a repealed act, they'll have to state their intention. State the intention behind the revival. Why do they want to revive the act which was earlier repealed? So revival is possible. However, the intention has to be stated. The intention of revival shall be stated. Then, section 8 talks of references to repealed enactment. If you remember section 115 JB example of the Income Tax Act, it gives reference to the Companies Act 1956. However, it has to be read as Companies Act 2013 for the purpose of applicability of the section. Section 9, it talks about commencement and termination of time. So commencement and termination of time basically says that when we are commencing the time, first day, whether it is a certain time period or series of time period. So first day shall be excluded. Last day shall be included. So first day is excluded and last day is included when we are computing the time. When does it start and when do we stop it? Then section 10, which talks about computation of time. Now let's say if the due date or if the date on which the performance has to happen, if it falls on a holiday or it is a day where the courts or offices are closed, then in that situation, what will we do in that situation? We will consider the next working day as the date of performance. Next working day will be considered as the date of performance. Then measurement of distances. How will the distances be measured? Distances will always be measured in a straight line. In a straight line on a horizontal plane. In a straight line on a horizontal plane. That is how the distances will be measured. Then section 12, duty to be taken pro rata. So this basically says that all the taxes which are charged, whether the quantity is less or whether the quantity is more, it shall be taken on the proportionate basis. Shall be taken on proportionate basis. And then section 13, a very important and interesting section. It basically says that masculine should include females as well and vice versa. And singular terms which are used in any law shall include plural and vice versa. So if there's any masculine term used, it should include females as well, feminine as well. And if singular terms are used, it should also include plural and vice versa. So these were certain general rules of interpretation which we understood. Now after the general rules of interpretation, we started with the powers and functionaries. What are the powers and what are the functionaries? Now section 14, what does it say? It says that if any enactment has given any power, if there's any power which you have, then it can be exercisable from time to time unless any contrary intention appears. So if any power has been, if you have been given some power, then you can use it from time to time. That is what section 14 talks about. Then section 15, power to appoint. So when an authority has a power to appoint, what can they do? They can at least either give a name of a person or appoint someone ex officio. They can either give name of a person, specify the name of the person whom they want to be appointed, or they can ex officio appoint someone. What is ex officio appointment? When one person holds office in another, when one person gets a position because of virtue of his holding one position is said to be ex officio. Say chairman of board of directors meeting will automatically become the chairman of the AGM. So that is ex officio. So when a person has a power to appoint, they can either give the name. The appointment may be made either by specifying the name or making an appointment ex officio. If a person has a power to appoint, they also have the power to suspend or dismiss. Power to appoint includes the power to suspend or dismiss. It's the power to suspend, dismiss. Okay. Moving ahead, talking about substitution of functionaries. So, if there's a person who is performing any function, who is rendering some services, then his official title, who is presently rendering those functions, his official title shall be mentioned, or any person who is commonly entrusted with that task, his name shall be mentioned. That is the substitution of functionaries. The law of successor shall be applied in case of organizations which have perpetual succession. So organizations which have perpetual succession, they should apply the rules for successors as applicable. Official, chief and subordinates, here we have understood that there's a superior and there are deputies or subordinates. So whatever is the duty of the superior will also be the duty of the subordinate. They'll not have any separate or different duties, but rather the duty of the superior will be the duty of his deputies or subordinates as well. Then we saw certain other provisions, orders, rules which are made under the enactment. How are we going to interpret a term or an expression which is used in any order or notification or rules? It will have the same meaning as given in the enactment. Will have the same meaning as given in the enactment. Say the definition of associate company as given in the Companies Act. If this term associate company is used in the notification or rule or regulation, it should have the same meaning as assigned to it in the Companies Act. Then, power to issue include power to amend, vary, resign. So the power to issue notifications, rules, regulation also includes the power to make any additions to it, to make amendments to it, to make changes to it, or resign it. So it includes everything. Then comes in making of rules and bylaws. So when we talk about rules and bylaws, let's say the rules and bylaws have been made between the time of assent of the act receiving assent and its commencement. If the rules or bylaws are made in between the time where the act has received its assent and its commencement, then the rule or bylaw, they shall become applicable only upon the commencement of the act. They will not become applicable earlier, they will become applicable only and only when the act actually comes into force, not before that. Then making rules or regulations or bylaws after previous publication. So if you remember ICAI syllabus change example, what did we understand here? We understood that here in this situation of prior approval, what has to be done? A draft has to be put forth before the people who will be impacted because of the change which is being made. Post that draft, we'll also have to take into consideration the suggestions and objections which are received from the authorities, and then finally it is published. Then continuation of orders of repealed enactment. So if there's any order which was passed under the repeal enactment, it will continue to exist unless and until actually discontinued, or unless and until any contrary intention appears. So the orders which are made under any repealed enactment, they will continue to exist. Moving ahead to the last part, see how quickly we have summarized the entire General Clauses Act, and this will really help you when you're doing your last minute revision. Section 25 talks about recovery of fines. So this recovery of fine basically will help us. See, there are different acts which have specified what are the fines which shall be imposed in case of different offenses which are committed. However, how shall the recovery of fines be done has not been stated. So how will the recovery of fines be done? As per section 63 to 70 of the Indian Penal Code and the provisions of Code of Criminal Procedure. This is how the recovery of fine has to be done. And if the act has some specific procedure given for the purpose of recovery of fines, then that specific procedure shall be applied. See, no specific procedure has been given, then we'll apply IPC and CRPC. But if there's a specific procedure given in the act for the purpose of recovery of fines, then we will use that specific procedure. Then coming to section 26, which talks about what if an offense is punishable under two or more enactments. Here we have understood that the trials can go on for those two different offenses. However, punishment will be given only once. A person cannot be punished for the same offense twice. Punishment will be given only once. He will not be punished for the same offense under two different acts. He will be punished only once. Meaning of service by post means what? When we send the documents by way of post, they should be properly addressed, prepaid, prepaid, and they should also be sent by a registered post. This is something which is given in the General Clauses Act. However, if there's any act which specifies a particular means of service of document, then that has to be followed. If there's nothing mentioned in the act, nothing specific mentioned in any act, then we come here and follow General Clauses Act. However, in acts like the Companies Act, we have a separate section for service of documents, so we'll follow that section there. Then comes to citation of enactments. So we can cite the enactment by either writing its name or by writing its number. So we can give reference to one enactment in another enactment. And when we are giving a reference, we do not bring the entire act here. We are not giving reference to the entire act, but rather we are giving reference to certain provisions of the act. That is called as citation of enactments. Then saving for previous enactment. So anything which has been given under the previous enactment will continue to be in force. It will continue to be in force unless until it is contrary or repugnant. Then application of act to ordinance. What is an ordinance? It is something which is passed by the President of India when the Parliament is not in session. This act, that is the General Clauses Act, will apply to ordinance as well, because the word Central Act, it includes an ordinance also. So the General Clauses Act will apply to the ordinances as well, which are issued by the President of India. So this was a very quick summary of the entire General Clauses Act, wherein we have revised in all the important points which we did, which we studied under this act in a lot of. So this was with reference to your General Clauses Act, and with this we complete the first topic of your other laws, which is the General Clauses Act. See,